I just had a question on the, I know we have the $8.9 million up there that is saying to fund the negotiated agreements, but then on the separate slide, we have the $1.9 million decrease, which is really the hiring turnover, and that's really kind of an offset. So I had a lot of questions from the community of, why do we separate those numbers out, and how do we make those estimations? So I know the $8.9 million increase for the negotiated agreements, that's assuming that the workforce stays exactly the same as it is today. So nobody retires, nobody new comes in, nobody leaves. Is that's how the 8.9 million?
That is correct. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And the question, I received that question too, and my answer has been, it's a matter of consistency, because the salary savings fluctuate from year to year, and that's a different number. So if I put out one year that the negotiated agreements cost $9 million because a step is $2 million and $5 million, and a cost of living adjustment is $2 million, and I back out, without showing it, I back out the salary savings, then I've got a different number than I put out the year before, which the salary savings may have been more or less. And so there's an inconsistency on what the negotiated agreements. So I thought it better to reflect it in two different places. But I think technically you're correct. The cost of negotiated agreements for if our workforce didn't change is roughly $9 million. But our workforce is going to change, and we've calculated that through salary savings, and so that's the same pot of money. I mean, we're reducing it, and it's less to implement. It's just to make sure that everybody understands the consistency from one year to the next with that number. It wouldn't materially change the request. It's just reflected differently within it.
Right.
I think it also adds another layer of transparency. We get accused all the time of not being transparent enough, and I think it's just one extra layer.
And consistency discussions with our bargaining groups, if we're throwing a hiring turnover figure in there, it would be I think, a much more difficult conversation to have with the bargaining units. And in years where we do a incentive, for instance, we can have a very large hiring turnover number, and then that may be buying forward some hiring turnover for the next year, so it may go way down. We may not have as much the following year. So they're two separate things. I can understand wanting to combine them, but I think the transparency is important, and the consistency is important.
I think it makes a lot of sense, just making sure that everybody understands what those two separate numbers are. And then I think that, so it's easier to understand, like you said, and the consistency with well, if our workforce didn't change at all, the exact number of employees that we have this year, if we had that same exact base next year, it would cost us $9 million. But we know there's going to be some changeover. So so the $1.9 million, I understand how you're saying that number can change dramatically from year to year, depending on what actually happens.